Hey, Amy Shaw here. I want to do a quick shout out to my very good friend, Patrick John Coleman, calls himself a shaman there in Chicago, Illinois. Patrick talks a lot about the Men in Black, especially lately. And he and I have had private conversations, many of them, about it. And I just felt inspired today, after my long conversation with him today, to share my own story about my experience with the Men in Black. So I grew up in the Joshua Tree area. I've shared that before in different videos. If you've ever been to Joshua Tree or you're from there yourself, then you know like what a funky little desert town it is. And weird stuff happens out in the desert. There's no doubt about that. I've definitely seen some stuff, and I could probably make a whole entire YouTube channel just talking about the different stuff I've experienced living in the desert. Stuff that I've seen, experiences that I've had, and some of them are quite bizarre. A lot of the encounters with people that I had living in the desert were quite bizarre. I don't talk a lot about that because I think that, we live in a culture that you start telling the truth about your experiences, and people will automatically assume that you're psychotic, that you're crazy, that you're imagining it, that you're making it up, or whatever. Because some of the stories are really kind of out there, and so I don't talk about a lot of them, even though some of them are very, very interesting. There are, I'd say, 3 or 4 core stories that I share with closest, friends, people. If you become my friend and you're in my life for any period of time, you're going to start hearing some of the desert stories. And some of them I've even shared with my husband. And so it's verified. We've both had the experience, and sometimes he'll even bring it up, to close friends that haven't gotten the story yet. Sometimes he'll start talking about the story, or one of my kids will bring it up, hey Dad, tell the story about that time. So it happens. We've had some quirky experiences. So my Men in Black experience actually happened though before I met my husband. It was when I was married with my ex-husband. He admittedly was an addict and was often very psychotic and under the influence of a drug-induced, sort of psychosis. So, my life was kind of really topsy-turvy at that point anyway, and it was really hard, to sort of live with that, and the constant sort of projection of, that psychotic state of mind, and trying to keep myself centered and grounded and combat against that while I was raising kids and going to school full-time. And, my life was not easy by any means, but so one day, I lived 2 miles down a dirt road in Joshua Tree, and I wasn't even in the actual village of Joshua Tree itself. If you've ever been to Joshua Tree, at least at that time, I haven't been back in 20 years, but at that time, there was literally nothing there but a convenience store and a post office. That was it. And then scattered along the highway, there was like maybe 1 restaurant and 1 bar. And then the further out you go towards 29 Palms, there was the sheriff's substation and the highway patrol office. That was it. Well, I lived out by the sheriff's office, so I was way out, almost on the very edge of Joshua Tree, and then 2 miles down a dirt road off the highway. So I really lived way out in the middle of nowhere. And it gets very hot there in the summer, very, very hot. So it was a summer day, and I was doing dishes. I had my back, to the front door. I was facing, front, so the front door was behind me. And I heard a knock on the door. And my oldest son at the time was probably only about 6 years old, maybe 6 or 7 years old. He was still really little. And way too little to be answering the door, right? And so for me to even get a random knock on the door, living 2 miles out in the desert on the dirt road, is really random and scary anyway. So right away, I turned around and looked over my shoulder, and I told him, do not answer that door. Well, he didn't listen. He opened the door. And I had a screen door in between the door and, the outside. So he opened the door, and there was the screen door. And as I turned around and was looking over my shoulder from the position of the kitchen, I saw there was a black man standing there at my door. Very tall, thin, completely dressed in all black. At that moment, my heart was like, oh my gosh, so I immediately turned the water off and turned around, and I quickly got to the door and I pushed my son behind me. And I stood there for a second and, just stunned. And the man says to me, I don't mean to bother you, ma'am, but I'm just wondering which way town is. And with that, he takes his hand and pushes back. Okay, so let me explain to you. It's in the middle of the desert, 2 miles down a dirt road. It's summer. It's hot as shit outside. He's black. I mean, very, very, very dark black man. He didn't have a bead of sweat on him. He's wearing a long black leather trench coat, a black turtleneck type shirt, black pants, black boots, black belt. He takes his hand and pushes his trench coat back on the side and reveals that he's got a holstered gun on his hip. My heart about stopped. At that moment, I thought, oh my God, I'm gonna die. Why he chose to show me his weapon, I don't really know, but I just thought I was gonna die. I thought my life was over at that moment. So he says, excuse me, ma'am, and he pulls this out. I don't mean to bother you. I just would like to know which way town is. And I have this huge lump in my throat. I got my son behind me, and I say to him, well, town's that way. So you could either walk straight through the desert and get there faster, but I wouldn't recommend it, or you can walk 2 miles down this dirt road, get to the highway, and then, follow the highway. And then that was it. He just said, okay, thank you very much. And I shut the door super, super quick. I don't even think he finished saying his words. And I had the door shut and locked. And I ran to my back door to make sure it was locked. As I was, got to the back door, I was looking out it to see if I saw him, pass down the dirt road. And I never saw him. So one of two things. I mean, he either completely disappeared, like he was just an apparition and he completely disappeared, or he chose to walk through the middle of the desert, which, if he was, because I had no windows on that side of the house. So if he was on that side walking through the desert, I may not have seen him from the angle that I was at looking at my back patio door. All I know is that he did not walk down the dirt road. So he either vanished or he walked through the middle of the desert with all the yucca trees and all the cholla cactuses and all the snakes and all the shit that's out in the desert. In the middle of the summer, blazing 100 degrees out, wearing all black head to toe, trench coat, not all that stuff. Crazy story, crazy story. If someone else told me it, I wouldn't believed it. But I experienced it firsthand myself, and I'm telling you, it happened. My ex-husband comes out of the bedroom, and he's sort of in this weird Thorazine-induced, because he would do that. Long story, I don't want to get into that. But he comes out of the bedroom, his little bed head scratching his head. And he says to me, oh, don't worry about that guy. He came for me. But when he saw that you guys opened the door, he said to himself, not another one with wife and kids. And he decided, not today. So that was how I lived. That was how I lived. The last 2 years of my marriage, that was how I lived, And so I had no idea what that meant. But he clearly had some connection to it. He understood it. I didn't. It terrified me. And so that was my very first experience with the Men in Black. True story. All right. I love you guys. Have a great day. I really enjoyed telling that. Maybe I will get the courage up to tell some more of my crazy desert stories. All right. Have a great day.